Hey, how's it going, guys? It's Mac here, and I'm really excited to go ahead and talk about today's topic, which is scalability. As you all know, I am big on the Tezos blockchain. However, I'm kind of wishy-washy on what I think about L2 scalability issues. I'm not sure exactly if ZK rollups are going to solve the issues that Ethereum is having, or if optimistic rollups are going to solve those issues. So I'm just kind of created this video, touch on a few points that I did some research on. I really want you guys to go ahead and leave a comment below. Let me know what you guys think about ZK rollups as well as L2 scalability, and if it's actually a viable future for the Tezos blockchain or any other blockchain for that matter, because this topic actually affects all the other blockchains. It is one of the three pillars of blockchains, and like what the issues are with blockchains, scalability, decentralization, as well as security. Today I'm going to go ahead and talk about scalability. As usual, if you like this channel and you want to get more amazing blockchain updates, feel free to go ahead and subscribe and hit that notifications bell below. And I'm going to go ahead and jump right into our PowerPoint right now. There we go. You can see here on the left-hand side, I have a little PowerPoint. I want to talk about scalability and why I think L2 scalability options are not viable in the long run. You can see here I have a nice, beautiful picture of umbrella shoes, and that is exactly what I think about L2 scalability. Before we move into scalability, you guys that are on this channel that are kind of new to blockchain and don't really understand the different layers of a blockchain, I want to go ahead and walk through this for you real quick. So there is actually 3 layers to a blockchain, and a lot of people, one layer is kind of an overhyped layer, which is the layer 0. Okay, it's a hype word. It's not many blockchains actually have a layer 0. It's not really a a thing, but blockchains claim to have it, and basically it is a protocol that facilitates the interaction between different blockchains. And some examples of that would be with Cosmos SDK, the IBC interblockchain network. It allows the blockchains to go ahead and communicate and send tokens from blockchain to blockchain, and makes it really easy and really simple. And I love IBC network. Another sort of layer 0 blockchain that kind of uses that hype word is CKB, or Nervos blockchain. It is actually a blockchain that's based on proof of work, and it uses like this thing called optimistic rollups, and basically everything is built on the layer 1, which is optimistic rollups, or layer 0 is what they like to call it. And however, I'm not exactly sure if this optimistic rollup thing is working well, because every time you want to get out of the layer 2 on Nervos network, it takes 3 days, and I'm going to touch upon that later in the video. Okay, and another layer 0 solution is Stargate Finance, and that also isn't really layer 0. It's kind of has tokens on each blockchain, and it allows you to jump USDC and stablecoins from one blockchain to the other, jump from USDT to USDC on Ethereum, USDT on Binance Smart Chain to USDC on Ethereum, and back and forth. And it's really useful, but at the same time, it's technically not layer 0 in my opinion. Now, then we have layer 1 blockchains, which is the base protocol blockchain layer network. And this refers to most blockchain networks: Ethereum, Tezos, Everscale, all the ones I've been talking about on my channel. Okay, and then you have layer 2 solutions. And right now there are different types of layer 2 solutions, and people kind of get them confused. So I'm going to talk about them real quick. The layer 2 solutions are actually third-party centralized solutions where you can run a layer 2 sort of software that basically confirms all the transactions with the base layer of the blockchain. Now, there are 2 types of layer 2 solutions, and I'm not extremely detailed about. I don't know, and I don't go crazy into depth of this stuff. Just know that there are optimistic rollups and ZK rollups. And optimistic rollups, basically it relies on the base layer to do all the transaction processing and everything, and it takes a long time to go ahead and withdraw your tokens and your Ethereum or whatever from the layer 2 to the layer 1. It takes, I think, about, on Ethereum it was 7 days or 2 weeks or something crazy like that. And then you have ZK rollups, which apparently fix this issue of withdrawing to the base layer, because it does all the processing transactions on the layer 2 and then just confirms those back on the layer 1. And that is something that Tezos is coming out with, and I'm trying to figure out if this is actually going to solve the issue of the withdrawal time from withdrawing from layer 2 to layer 1. One common mistake people make when thinking about layer 2 solutions is sharding. Sharding is not technically a layer 2 solution, and I'll kind of get into what sharding is later. I will talk about it as a scalability function, but it is not a layer 2 solution, so don't get confused there. Let's go and jump on to the next topic, which is, where does scalability come into the picture? Scalability issues. There are 3 scalability factors you have to think about when you're trying to scale your blockchain, and that is the cost and capacity of the blockchain itself. Over time, your blockchain, it will get bigger and bigger and require more space and computing power to process the transactions. One thing I want to put in here, which might not be 100% true, but it's something I see as being a cost and capacity factor, is the block time. Once you're able to reduce the capacity by using sharding or some other sort of scalability feature, you can actually reduce the block time, making it much faster to process transactions. And this is separate from transactions per second, which is TPS. Okay, I'll get to that in a second. Block time is necessary for usability issues. When you have users on your network who have to wait, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, a minute to process transactions, they get fed up. The human conscious only has so much attention span, especially me. I have like ADHD like crazy. I could barely pay attention for 8 seconds at a time, let alone 30 seconds. So I'm gonna forget what I'm doing while waiting for that block to go ahead and that transaction to go ahead and be processed. So I think block transaction time is very, very important when it comes to scalability as well. Now, network is also another issue, and this is an issue that a lot of blockchains have when they're trying to become decentralized, is that they have a lot of bad actors who have really bad internet connections or have really bad hardware, and so they kind of slow down or bog down the network, and that is a very, very big issue. And I'll talk about solutions for that later. Another problem, the third problem, is throughput. Throughput is transactions per second, and I'll go ahead and talk about that in the next slide. Next slide. Okay, so let's talk about the first one, which is cost and capacity, and this has to do with data scalability techniques. And I want to talk about some of these techniques in this video. Some of these techniques include IPFS, which is a storage solution. You can store your PNGs, all your extra files and everything that would take up a lot of space on the blockchain. You can store them in a different decentralized network. And they actually have blockchains that work as IPFS servers now, such as Filecoin, Library, Siacoin, etc., etc., etc. Now, another technique is sharding. Now, over here on the right-hand side, you can see I have a little picture of sharding. Think about Ethereum right now, and then you think about Ethereum after sharding. And some blockchains have sharding, like Harmony One has sharding, and Everscale has sharding. And there's some big issues with sharding, which has to do with security, because they can attack one of the shards. Imagine attacking one of these crystals, and you crack the crystal, and that crack slowly spreads to the other crystals. So that becomes a security issue with sharding. Now, there are plenty of different mathematical ways to go ahead and prevent these kind of attacks, and they're being developed right now. So I think sharding is actually a really cool technology, and it will slowly be, progressed over time. But as of right now, it is one of the biggest ways to go ahead and increase the cost and capacity of your blockchain. Utilizing file store blockchains, like I said, Siacoin, Filecoin, Library, etc. Library is a decentralized YouTube kind of thing I've been getting into. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to go ahead and follow me there. Appreciate it. Thank you. Anyways, and as a bonus sort of note on this slide, I went ahead and wanted to talk about a scale up approach, and this is one of my biggest factors I have in this presentation today, talking about the scale up approach of using high spec computers that have good hard disk capacity and throughput, and high specs upfront, which means you'll have less cost in developing the blockchain software. Because you already have high specs, you don't have to worry about upgrading to match higher specs in the future. So just putting the high specs in now, paying the extra money now, means you can focus on other issues for the blockchain, such as security and decentralization. Now let's go ahead and go on to network. So network solutions here. Network relies on many factors, and this has to do with the service specifications and reliability, and it also has to do with internet reliability and connectivity. There are various ways of dealing with the bad actors, and the main ones I want to touch on here are reward and punishment. Now, this is a really good way to go ahead and reward good actors, reward actors that have the proper specs, that are always connected to the network, and always validating the blocks that are assigned to them. And by validating blocks, just think about it as like putting a stamp on a transaction, okay? Okay, processed. That's what validating a block is, and that's what the blockchain is. It goes up block by block, right? Okay, so there are different ways to do this. They have community-led sort of reward programs where a community kind of pays the better validator nodes, or they have a system where bad actors are slashed and you get rewards cut, or you even get part of your bond cut. Now, you can think about this as kind of paying your tax money to politicians who are actually implementing bills and policies that help you as a citizen. So once they actually implement what they say they're going to do, then you release the tax money and it gets paid to them. And that's exactly what inflation tax is and what the staking is on the blockchain. As a bonus, using a scale-up approach requiring high-tech service is a good network connection upfront to reward good actors is also a very good way to go ahead and increase the sort of network throughput of your blockchain and making sure people have a good network connection and don't hold up the blockchain. Okay, and the last point I want to touch on, the number 3 point here, is throughput. So TPS and data layer scalability. Okay, sorry, TPS is data layer scalability is actually up the top there, so that's something else. But I want to take a look at the TPS of some different blockchains as well as Visa. So you can see here, the Bitcoin TPS is 7 transactions per second. So basically, around the world, like only 7 people can send one, like a Bitcoin or a piece of a Bitcoin at a time, and then each second adds another 7. So only a certain amount of transactions can be processed per minute, which is why Bitcoin network is very slow, and they created what's it called, Lightning Network or whatever. Then you have Ethereum, which is a little bit faster, 15 TPS, and they have scalability options like Optimism that increase that because you can just kind of send your Ethereum to the layer 2, but it's a pain in the butt, and it's basically a separate blockchain in my opinion. Anyways, let's go ahead and go to Tezos, which is 1000 TPS. That means a lot more people can use buy MTs and everything on the blockchain. However, Tezos still has a 30-second block time, which is a major deficit or major issue right now, I think, in my opinion. But Tezos will also have 1000 TPS in the future. Now, the nice part about TPS is it's good for sort of financial institutions. So more financial institutions can actually send transactions at a time, which is why TPS is very important. For the everyday user, TPS is also important, but I think it's more of an institutional sort of goal. And that's when we get to Visa, which is 24,000 TPS, and that's pretty high, okay? And I believe it can go higher, and it's a very centralized, database layer solution, so it's good. But it's also, centralized. Then you have Solana, which is 50K to 65K. I've read different articles that said different things, so I just kind of put the range here. And then you have Everscale, which is 55,000, and it's very similar to Solana, but it also has sharding. Anyways, when you're looking at TPS, it only shows how many concurrent transactions that can happen across the blockchain at a time. So this does not directly connect to transaction speed. Transaction speed has to do with block time and block finality. Very important when it comes to scalability, but it isn't always talked about, transaction speed, which is the block time. Okay, and as a bonus, again, I want to talk about TPS has a direct connection to server specs. Requiring higher specs in the beginning allows for higher TPS off the bat. And see Solana and Everscale, for examples. Also, I think Aleph Zero is focusing on that as well. So it's a scale up versus scale out approach. So think about it like a tall building versus many smaller buildings. A lot of people say that, oh, it's not decentralized, but if you actually look at the validator nodes, which we'll look at in a second, you'll see that actually certain networks have more validator nodes than others and are more decentralized. Anyways, L2s versus scaled up L1s. Pros and cons. So L2s, I kind of try to keep out some of the pros for both and the cons for both because they both have high level of security because they rely on the base blockchain. L1, it's on the base blockchain, so it relies on it. And L2s, they confirm the transactions on the blockchain. For L2s, the pros are cheaper L1 server requirements. And I'll talk about that in a second. For example, I think Tezos is like $500 server requirement, Solana and Everscale is like $5,000. So it's about 10x more, right? Even though the TPS is about 40x more, something like that for Solana and Everscale. It's also easier to build in blocks, and this also goes along with the fact that it's less forking of the main blockchain. One thing to go along with this for Tezos is Tezos doesn't fork, we upgrade. So for me, actually, I think it makes sense to go ahead and upgrade the main blockchain rather than going to L2 solutions because we have the really nice forking solution. Well, we have the nice upgrade solution. So honestly, that's why I'm kind of confused as to why we're going for an L2 solution. But anyways, some of the cons of the L2 solutions are long withdrawal to L1 without L0 bridges. So like Stargate is the L0 bridge, and that connects Ethereum to Optimism and allows you to bring your USDC back from Ethereum to Optimism without waiting I think it's 7-day waiting period to withdraw your tokens from Optimism sort of blockchain, or I guess L2 solution. L2 solutions aren't as decentralized as the base layer blockchain. So L2 solutions are run by third parties, and if they go down, then there is no way to go ahead and withdraw your tokens unless you interact with the smart contract interface to go ahead and withdraw. In that case, it will take 7 days, especially if the third-party bridge goes down. Pros and cons of scaled up L1s. There is less hardware costs due to having one main layer. Now, this is because L2s, they can be run on the same server as the L1s, but as server specs go up and the L2 requirements go up, you're actually basically you're paying double power to have the application, unless you're running like a Docker program and it's running different containers inside of your servers. In that case, it might be cheaper, but you're still running two programs instead of running one program for the L1 solution. So you can actually have all of your security bottled up into one section, which is the L1 solution, rather than having to have your L2 and your different L2 containers. And instead you just have one validator node, right? You also have higher TPS on the base layer, which actually goes into the next point, which is less complicated for the end users. End users don't have to go from L2 to L1 to do all this stuff. And institutional speaking, like speaking for institutions, institutionally speaking for institutions, basically, I don't think they're going to really care about L2s. They're going to just have their own L2 and then build on that and do their banking system on that or whatever they want to do. For the end users like me and you who are into DeFi or whatever, it's much more complicated to go ahead and do these extra transactions to go onto the L2, then use bridges to go off, and then we have to pay bridging fees and all that. Then we have to bridge our tokens from this blockchain to that blockchain, and it adds an whole extra layer of like complicatedness that you don't really need, I believe. If you have any comments regarding that, please let me know in the comments. I'm open to criticism. I'm trying to figure out honestly what my opinion is, and this is kind of where I've come so far. The cons for it are larger main chain. So basically the data on the main chain goes up. However, if you have sharding, that kind of separates that issue. You have sharding, so it holds the data on different shards. So also you're going to have more forks because upgrades happen on the main chain. I think if you want to have less upgrades on the main chain and just focus on the third parties, then you can keep upgrading those much faster because they're centralized solutions, and then the main chain can kind of just stay the same, which is really what CKB has done. They're focusing on developing layer 2 solutions, and I believe Ethereum's probably going to go that direction, and I think Tezos is also going to go that direction, although we do have the L1 sort of like upgradability like I talked about. But I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Of course I'm open to suggestions and criticism. One of the biggest things I wanted to talk about today was the hardware costs over time, the prices in hardware and CPU computing power over time. So Gordon E. Moore, he was the founder of Intel, and he created a law that has so far stood the test of time. And that law is basically the number of transistors in an integrated circuit would double every 2 years. Basically put, that means the cost of hardware is going to half every 2 years. And you can see that in the iPhone specs, the Samsung specs, the computer specs. Over time, the hardware cost is going down and the efficiency is going up. Costs less power to run better hardware over time. And that basically doubles every 2 years. You can go ahead and check out this link. I'll leave it in the description. It sort of talks about the growth of the processor over time. In the interview with the Solana founder as well, his name is Anatoly Yakovenko. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that, but he mentions hardware costs are also going down over time, and that's one of the key reasons on Solana. He focused on scaling up from the get-go rather than having to upgrade the software to deal with multi-threading and the upgrades in the hardware. He just buys the most expensive hardware in the beginning and then kind of lets other things grow around it rather than having to go ahead and upgrade the main blockchain over and over again, focusing on the other issues of the blockchain like security and other things like that. So it actually saves development costs over time if you just go ahead and scale up right from the get-go, because you're going to have to adjust the software to go ahead and meet the hardware in the long run. Plus, you're going to have to pay for new hardware in the future if you're always running the bare minimum hardware for the blockchain. So a lot of people come to me for these different blockchain issues, and a lot of people say they like Tezos. And the reason I really like Tezos was because I could run it on a Raspberry Pi. And I thought this was really, technically speaking, really cool. However, this didn't increase the amount of bakers, the amount of validator nodes by a crazy amount. I thought this would be used as a technique to go ahead, a marketing technique to get a crap ton of, validator nodes. Like, how Pi does, that Pi app on your phone, everyone, like, you can press it once a day and you get like an advertisement and then you get this Pi token or whatever. And it uses a marketing effect because everyone can do it on their phone. And I thought that's kind of what Tezos was going for with the low spec computing requirements for the nodes. But then they also had an 8,000 Tez requirement to go ahead and become a baker, and I'll talk about that later. I'm going to go ahead and go into my thoughts on the cost of running a validator node. But with Tezos, for example, you used to be able to run a bakery on a low-spec computer, $200, and you would need at least 8,000 Tez to be able to run, which was $24,000 a couple months ago, and now that's about $16,000 or $24,000 a couple months ago. Yeah. Now you need 6,000 Tez and at least $500 a server, so the spec requirements have gone up. Also, I believe Tezos is adding multi-threading in the future, which I believe is going to raise us to 1,000 TPS, but I'm not 100% sure about that. I plan to go ahead and check it out another video. I don't know when that update is coming exactly. And I got these specs. Right now there's current validators are 409. So I would assume that you would use this low number of requirements, this low spec requirements to go ahead and promote your blockchain to get more validator nodes to build a community. But that hasn't really been the case for Tezos. So I'm not sure why they even chose the low spec computer requirements to begin with when they first created the blockchain, if they're not going to use that as a marketing technique. With Solana, you need about $5,000 a node because they have really high spec requirements. It requires quite a bit of power. I would say your power requirements about 450 watts. Tezos is about 250 watts right now. You can probably go as low as 120 watts. And before it was actually like 24 watts. At the same time, the TPS is still about 50 times more, which doesn't really make up the difference in power requirements for Tezos between Tezos and Solana. Also, Solana tends to have a lot more validator nodes, and I do believe a lot of these are probably run by some of the same companies, but they do have a lot of validator nodes, and I do know that there is only a certain amount of these validator nodes that get rewards. You have to be, I think, in the top performers in order to actually get rewards. And so it's a lot of competition on Solana, and they do reward people for being having better network connectivity and having better specs and just running your hardware better and being a good participant in the network and not being a bad actor. And currently Tezos, they do have a slashing factor if you double bake or if you double validate a block, but they don't really have any like reward system. They just don't give you rewards if you don't bake a block. And even now you can miss, I think, 30% of your endorsements and you still get your full reward. Now, some of my specs might be wrong here. Please feel free to leave a comment below. Let me know. I'm trying to summarize all this data that's out there. It's really not easy to get all this data. So please let me know what you guys think in the comments. Scaled up L1 solutions will be run on cell phones in 2030. Now, this is my personal idea. I've been looking at some of the different specs, requirements, and how they changed over time of cell phones and smartwatches. And if you take a look, the iPhone 4 back in 2010. They basically took the iPhone 4 in 5 years, put it into a form factor that's 1/5 of the size, and doubled the specs. If you think in 5 years they were able to do that, what do you think they'll be able to do in 7 years' time? Just to kind of push on this point, you go to my next slide, you can look at the M1 Apple Studio right now, which runs on 110 watts of power, 110 to 250 watts. And this can run a Solana node quite easily for the next 10 years. It costs about $6,000. The power requirements is actually the same as the Tezos node right now. And you can run a Solana node on these specs. This is one issue I see with the L2 solutions because you can get a lot higher TPS if you spend money on the hardware now. And that means you won't have to upgrade your hardware a few years down the line, as we have to raise the bar to compete with other blockchains. L2 solutions, I mean, they might be either way, but I'm trying to solidify my opinion here. And please let me know, of course, what you guys think about this hardware talk I've had today. So the key takeaways for the video today. Now, personally, I've used L2s, optimistic rollups, and I feel like I'm always living in fear when I have my money on my crypto on the L2. And I'm always afraid that the third party will shut down the website and I won't be able to withdraw my tokens from the L2. And I know I'll be able to interact with the smart contracts and withdraw it. And on CKB, I think it takes 36 hours or 72 hours or something. And on Ethereum, it takes, I think, 7 days. And Tezos going to take 2 weeks, I believe. And I'm really trying to figure that out right now, but nobody seems to be able to answer my question. But I did look at the documentation and it did say 2 weeks. I'm a bit worried about that. I think scalability and decentralization is important, but we also need to understand the hardware costs over time, as well as the power requirements for that hardware. So we can say Tezos is an eco-friendly blockchain for a long time. However, right now you can run an eco-friendly validator node for Solana, which just costs $6,000, and it runs off about 150 watts, which is about the same as the Tezos node right now. So the whole eco thing, you have to think about it logically and kind of add the hardware and the costs and everything over the next couple of years and not just think about the consensus mechanism for the blockchain. As a user of L2 on Ethereum and Nervos, I feel like the tech adds an extra step of keeping things I feel like the tech, it adds an extra step and makes the usability of the actual layer 2 much kind of cumbersome for the end user. So you have to withdraw and then use it on CKB and then deposit back on. And unless you have something like Stargate to go ahead and withdraw and deposit from different blockchains from L1 to L2 really fast with low fees, then it kind of ruins the point of having an L2 that has low fees, right? Now, I'm not supremely familiar with ZK rollups, and I am curious to see if they will go ahead and really reduce the withdrawal period to L1. And I don't really see this topic addressed much on the different forums, Reddit, Agora, or anywhere else. So I wasn't able to pull any examples for the ZK rollups. And if any of my viewers or any of you guys have any sort of thoughts on this or have any articles on this, I'd love to read up on it about some of the solutions that ZK rollups will have for this withdrawal time. Anyways, I hope you guys all really enjoyed that talk today. I kind of went in depth about the layer 2 scalability issues, and I think I touched on some pretty good points. Of course, if I'm wrong about anything, feel free to go ahead and leave a comment. Let me know. I'm really curious to hear about everyone's opinion on this. With Corona, you can't really go out and meet people and talk about things, so pretty much the only thing you can do is go on the web and scour and try and find information. I hope to see you guys all in my next video, and I will catch you later. Peace out, guys.
Bro, we need to pump it. Everybody go to the Twitter and hashtag the things, pump it. You know, pump it real good. We need a good pump. Everybody deserves a nice Tezos pump.